In this edition of Back in History, we take you back in time to the events of the 7th military coup in Nigeria. This is the coup that was championed by Major Gideon Oka and his comrades in arms. In the said coup, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, the then military president of Nigeria, escaped death by the whisker. His ADC, Lieutenant Colonel UK Bello, was killed in the coup, while Sani Abacha, the then chief of army staff, rose in defense of the regime and personally led soldiers to repel and frustrate the coup. This whole scenario took place at Dodan Barracks in Lagos, which was the seat of power at the time. It appears that this singular experience quickened Babangida's decision to see to the construction and timely completion of Aso Rock Villa in Abuja and move the seat of power to a more secure and more protected location. Welcome to this edition of Back in History. The date was 22nd April 1990. It was on a Sunday. It was at about 1:40 or 1:45 a.m., a time when most people had gone to bed. Dodan Barracks, the most fortified government institution at the time, was attacked by a group of army officers whose mission was to remove Babangida from power, dead or alive, and effect a change of leadership in the country. The coup plotters gained access into the barracks and took strategic positions. One of their major targets was the residence of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. The residence came under ferocious attack, and almost every part of it was destroyed by random shooting by the coup plotters. The attack was so ferocious and intense that the bedroom of the head of state was almost completely destroyed, and the coup plotters thought that Babangida had been killed in the gunfire. Unknown to the coup plotters, Babangida and members of his family had been ferried out of the building by Lieutenant Colonel UK Bello, who was Babangida's ADC at the time. It has been reported that at the time the coup plotters gained access to the barracks, UK Bello was sleeping in his quarters, which was directly opposite the residence of the head of state. It has been reported also that it was the sound of the gunfire that woke him up. How UK Bello braved the odds to cross over to the residence of his master to move him and his family to safety remains a mystery till today. Babangida and his family were ferried across the fence and taken to safety in the house of one of Babangida's friends outside the barracks. Babangida was safe, so also were members of his family. But Babangida and his wife Mariam will never forget the experience of the said dates. Their body and souls were terrified beyond description, having come face to face with death. Having secured the safety of the first family, UK Bello returned to the barracks. His mission this time was to engage the coup plotters, chase them away, and secure the seat of power for the return of his boss. At the time of UK Bello's return, the coup was in full swing. Everywhere was charged. Bello did not know that his return to the barracks would mark the end of his life. He found his way to one of the armored tanks and entered the tank prepared to engage the coup plotters. Bello began to press the buttons in the tank, but unknown to him, the firing pins of the armored tank had been removed by the maintenance engineer who last serviced the tank. The said engineer did so on purpose, as he was later identified as one of the coup plotters. While Bello was still in the armored tank, trying to make his way through the buttons, Bello was sighted by the coup plotters, who got closer and shot him at close range. Bello died instantly inside the armored tank. At this time, Radio Nigeria had been taken over by some of the coup plotters, and Major Gideon Oka was making his broadcast to the nation, announcing the coup and giving reasons for the coup. His speech went as follows, unquote, "Fellow citizens, on behalf of the patriotic and well-meaning people of the Middle Belt and the southern part of this country, I, Major Gideon Oka, wish to happily inform you of the successful removal of the dictatorial, corrupt, drug baronish, evil man, deceitful, homosexually centered, prodigalistic, unpatriotic administration of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida. We have equally commenced their trials for unabated corruption, mismanagement of the national economy, the murders of Delegiwa, Major General Maman Vatsa, with other officers, as there was no attempted coup but mere intentions that were yet to materialize, and other human rights violations. We wish to emphasize that this is not just another coup, but a well-conceived, planned, and executed revolution for the marginalized, oppressed, and enslaved people of the Middle Belt and the South, with a view to freeing ourselves and children yet unborn from eternal slavery and colonization by a clique of this country. Our history is replete with numerous and uncontrollable instances of callous and insensitive, dominatory, repressive intrigues by those who think it is their birthright to dominate till eternity the political and economic privileges of this great country, to the exclusion of the people of the Middle Belt and the South. They have almost succeeded in subjugating the Middle Belt and making them voiceless, and now extending same to the South. It is our unflinching belief that this quest for domination, oppression, and marginalization is against the wish of God, and therefore must be resisted with the vehemence it deserves. Anything that has a beginning must have an end. For the avoidance of doubt, we wish to state the three primary reasons why we have decided to oust the satanic administration of Ibrahim Babangida. The reasons are as follows: to stop Babangida's desire to cunningly install himself as Nigeria's life president at all costs. Another reason for the change is the need to stop intrigues, domination, and internal colonization of the Nigerian state by the so-called chosen few. This, in our view, has been and is still responsible for 90% of the problems of Nigeria. The third reason for the change is the need to lay a strong egalitarian foundation for the real democratic takeoff of the Nigerian states or states as circumstances may dictate. In the light of all the above, and in recognition of the negativeness of the aforementioned aristocratic factor, the overall progress of the Nigerian state, a temporary decision to remove the following states, namely Sokoto, Borno, Katsina, Kano, and Bauchi states from the Federal Republic of Nigeria comes into effect immediately. By this token, all citizens of the 5 states already mentioned are temporarily suspended from all public and private offices in the Middle Belt and southern parts of this country until some conditions are met. They are also required to move back to their various states within 1 week from today. They will, however, be allowed to return and join the Federal Republic of Nigeria when stipulated conditions are met. In the same vein, all citizens of the Middle Belt and the South are required to come back to their various states pending when the so-called all-in-all Nigerians meet the conditions that will ensure a united Nigeria. A word is enough for the wise. A curfew is hereby imposed from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. until further notice. All members of the armed forces and the police forces are hereby confined to their respective barracks. All unlawful and criminal acts by those attempting to cause chaos will be ruthlessly crushed. Be warned, as we are prepared at all costs to defend the new order. All radio stations are hereby advised to hook on permanently to the national network program until further notice. Long live all true patriots of this great country of ours. May God and Allah, through His bountiful mercies, bless us all. Unquote. Gideon Oka's speech did not go down well with a lot of people in the country. The speech was controversial and threw several segments of the country into confusion. It was difficult, for instance, to accept Gideon Oka's removal of 5 northern states from the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The announcement kept running at Radio Nigeria, and at this time, Babangida was already in hiding, and the vast majority of Nigerians who listened to the coup speech of Gideon Oka thought sincerely that Babangida's administration had indeed been toppled as stated in the coup speech. While the coup announcement was running, Sani Abacha, the then Chief of Army Staff and Babangida's right-hand man and most trusted ally, got in contact with the head of state to ensure that he was alive. Abacha then changed to combat gear and began to engage the coup plotters. He rallied a few loyal soldiers around and engaged in a devastating gun duel with the coup plotters. Abacha overpowered the coup plotters, and when the coup plotters came under intense heat, they abandoned their weapons and retreated and ran away from the barracks. Through the gallantry efforts of Abacha and UK Bello, Babangida's life was saved. His administration was also saved. UK Bello paid the supreme price with his life, but Abacha was alive to consolidate Babangida's hold to power. He successfully brought him back to the seat of power from his hiding place. It is reported that Babangida was terrified beyond description. Sani Abacha had every opportunity to have made himself the head of state at that moment, but he refused to do so. This is where Babangida had tremendous respect for Sani Abacha and held him in high esteem as a good friend and honest comrade in military uniform. Babangida would never joke with Abacha throughout his tenure, and even in Babangida's retirement up to the time of the death of Abacha, Babangida had tremendous respect for Abacha. Gideon Oka's announcement on Radio Nigeria was brought to an end, and a couple of coup plotters were arrested. Abacha, as Chief of Army Staff, had taken full control of the situation. He secured the loyalty of key officers in the country. Having been assured of their loyalty to the Babangida administration, and having taken control of the situation, Abacha drafted a speech and made a broadcast to the nation. The speech went as follows, unquote. I, Lieutenant General Sani Abacha, Chief of Army Staff, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, have found it necessary to address you once again in the course of our nation's history. In view of the unfortunate developments early this morning, I am in touch with the CGS, Service Chiefs, GOCs, FOCs, AOCs of the Armed Forces, and they have all pledged their unflinching support and loyalty to the federal military government of General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, who is perfectly safe and with whom I am in contact. Early this morning, there was sporadic firing by a few disloyal and misguided soldiers in some isolated parts of Lagos, followed by an embarrassing radio broadcast. Fellow Nigerians, you will all agree with me that the reasons given for this grave misconduct are significantly motivated by greed and self-interest. The soldiers involved decided to constitute themselves into national security nuisance for no other cause than bare avarice. Most of these disloyal elements have been arrested and are already undergoing interrogation. The remaining dissidents are advised in their own interest to report to the nearest military location and hand over the arms and ammunition in their possession. All formation and unit commanders are hereby directed to exercise effective command and control. At this stage, let me reiterate our commitment to pursue vigorously the transition program. No amount of threat or blackmail would detract the federal military government's attention in this regard. We are set to hand over power to a democratically elected government in 1992. I wish to assure all law-abiding citizens that the situation is now under control and people should go about pursuing their lawful interests. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you. Unquote. Shortly after Abacha's speech, President Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida also addressed the nation in a national broadcast in the following words, unquote: "Fellow Nigerians, I salute you all. First and foremost, let me assure you further that the unfortunate situation of this morning in some parts of Lagos has been brought under control by loyal troops, as earlier stated by the Chief of Army Staff and Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff, Lieutenant General Sani Abacha, with whom I have been in contact and he is with me this evening. I also want to seize this opportunity to commend all members of the Nigerian Armed Forces, the Nigerian Police, and the security agents for the gallant and professional manner the situation was contained. Let me also congratulate the civil populace for their continued support for this administration. I wish to state that all law-abiding citizens should go about their normal duties and their safety guaranteed. Let me also assure the diplomatic community and all foreigners in the country that the security of their lives and property is hereby guaranteed. Long live the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you for your cooperation." Unquote. Babangida's speech signaled the clear fact that Babangida was still alive and that the seat of power had not been taken over by the coup plotters. In essence, it was a failed coup. Babangida survived the attack and his administration was intact. Military formations in Lagos and across the nation were in control of the pro-Abacha elements and the pro-Babangida elements. Ikeja Cantonment was firmly under the control of Brigadier Ishaya Bameyi, a pro-Babangida and Abacha person. Ojo Cantonment was also firmly secured. Military governors at the various states also pledged their support and loyalty to the regime and took steps to fortify their military formations in their states. Babangida's admirers were happy with the turn of events, but the coup plotters were shattered and totally and completely unhappy with the situation, understanding also the consequences that they were to face upon being arrested. Having brought the situation under control, the next line of action was to calm the city of Lagos and its environs for the coup plotters and their sponsors. Several of the coup plotters were arrested, detained, tried in military tribunal, and sentenced to death by firing squad or sentenced to life imprisonment, depending on their levels of involvement in the coup. Major Gideon Oka, the arrowhead of the coup, was arrested along with about 300 other military personnel and more than 30 civilians. It must be stated that this initial arrest was a random arrest, as it was impossible to have a coup plot with such humongous number of persons in the plot. Most of these persons were later released upon the finding of absence of guilt or involvement on their parts. Other key participants like Colonel Tony Nyam from Cross River State escaped and went abroad and thus was not tried. Major Saliba Mukuru, a key participant, also escaped and flee abroad. Other participants also flee abroad and were never arrested. A special military tribunal was set up for the trial of the arrested persons. The tribunal was chaired by then Major General Nwachukwu. Brigadier General Tunde Olorin was appointed as the chief prosecutor, while Lieutenant Colonel Akin Kejawa led the defense team. 3 months thereafter, precisely in July 1990, Major Gideon Oka and 41 others were found guilty of involvement in a coup and thus convicted for treason and sentenced to death by firing squad. A number of persons were acquitted and discharged by the Nwachukwu-led panel, but at the point of the execution of those convicted, most of them raised alarm that several of the persons acquitted and discharged were actually persons who participated in the coup but were acquitted on ethnic and other considerations. Following this allegation, the Armed Forces Ruling Council ordered for retrial of 31 of the persons earlier acquitted. Another panel was thus constituted, and this time around it was headed by Major General Yohana Yerima Kure, with Lieutenant Colonel Kemi Peters appointed as the chief prosecutor and Lieutenant Colonel J.O.J. Okolagu appointed to lead the defense team. This second panel also found some persons guilty and sentenced them to death. In the end of the exercise, several persons were found guilty, convicted to death, and were executed by firing squad at the Krikri Maximum Prison. This will turn out to be the only coup in Nigeria which consumed the highest number of military personnel arising from the verdict of the military court-martial. A couple of civilians were fingered in the coup. For instance, as reported by Associated Press and confirmed by Wikipedia, Chief Great Uburu, the fish merchant and popular businessman from Delta State, was fingered as the financier of the coup. It is reported that some of the coup plotters took off from his warehouse in Lagos. It is obvious that Uburu would have been executed by the regime for his role in sponsoring the overthrow of the regime, but he was smart enough to escape from the country. Great Uburu is still alive at the time of the making of this video in 2022 and has contested elections several times in his home state of Delta in his aspiration to become the governor of the oil-rich state of the Niger Delta region. But his aspiration is yet to materialize as he has not yet won any of the elections. Nevertheless, Great Uburu remains a political stalwart in his state till today and walks around freely, as his participation in the coup appears to have long been forgotten by a fraction of time. The coup did not succeed, but the coup brought significant changes to the way of life of the Babangida administration. Babangida now found it difficult to trust people the way he did before the coup. Security around Dodan Barracks, his office and official residence was beefed up to the highest possible level. Life was never going to be the same again. It is reported that the experience of the failed coup shook Babangida beyond description, to the extent that he began for the first time to feel extremely unsafe in Lagos. The experience made him to expedite action towards the construction and completion of Aso Rock Villa in Abuja, which was considered to be a more secure residence for the president of the country and for the first family. The coup brought some names to limelight. Names like Major Gideon Oka, Colonel Tony Nyam, who was the most senior officer among the coup plotters, Lieutenant Colonel UK Bello, who was Babangida's ADC and who was killed in the coup, Captain N. Hali Empere, who was a key participant in the coup, Captain Perebo Dakolo, who was a key participant in the coup, Captain A.A. Nonju, who was also a key participant in the coup, Lieutenant Lakogun, Lieutenant C.N. Ode, Lieutenant Cyril Ozualo, Lieutenant N. Deji, Second Lieutenant A.B. Umukoro, who were all key participants in the coup. Second Lieutenant E.J. Ejesuku, Sergeant Julius Itwa, and many others also participated in the coup, and their names came to limelight following the coup as was executed by them. Major Gideon Oka, who was the arrowhead of the coup, was from Benue State of Nigeria. He was born on October 4, 1952 and was executed on July 27, 1990. He was barely 38 years old at the time. He was the 9th child of Levi Oka, a teacher of the Tiv heritage in Api village of Benue State. He began his officer cadet training at the Nigerian Defense Academy Kaduna with the 13th Regular Combatant Course. He was commissioned to the rank of Second Lieutenant in December 1974. He was a trained armored tank personnel. He was part of the peacekeeping contingent in Chad in 1978. He also served in various army units in the country. He was well known to Babangida, and Babangida was also a trained armored tank personnel and saw Gideon Oka as a younger colleague in the Armored Corps. Tony Nyam was the most senior military officer in the 1990 coup. He hails from Buki in Cross River State. He attended primary school in Lagos before going to the Nigerian Military School in Zaria. He subsequently attended the Nigerian Defense Academy as part of the 9th Regular Combatant Course, beginning in January 1971. Upon completion of his program at the Nigerian Defense Academy, he was inducted into the Corps of Engineers. He attended Earthwork University in Edinburgh and undertook a second degree at the University of Aberdeen, Scotland. During this period, he was seconded to the British Army. When he returned to Nigeria, he joined General Babangida's staff at the Army headquarters. He was a staff officer at the Army headquarters until just before the coup, when he was posted to the Command and Staff College at Jaji as the directing staff. Nyam was well known to Babangida, having worked closely with him. Following the failure of the coup, Nyam escaped from Nigeria and remained abroad for several years before his eventual return to the country. He was a classmate to UK Bello. Lieutenant Colonel UK Bello was an indigene of Niger State. He started his officer cadet training with the 9th Regular Combatant Course in January 1971 at the Nigerian Defense Academy Kaduna. He was commissioned in the rank of Second Lieutenant in June 1973 and posted to the Reese Regiment. He attended several courses in the Nigerian Army School of Infantry and some armor officers courses in Britain and in the United States of America. He was shot and killed while attempting to operate an armored tank in Dodan Barracks to repel the coup plotters against Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida's government. 2 days after he was killed, UK Bello was buried in his ancestral home at Paiko village in Niger State with full military honors. He was buried close to the grave of his father, Sakin Muhammadu Bello, who was the village head of Paiko. The burial was attended by the top brass in the military at the time, among whom were Lieutenant General Sani Abacha, who was the Chief of Army Staff and Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff, Air Vice Marshal Nureni Yusuf, who was the Chief of Air Staff, Rear Admiral Motola Nyako, who was the Chief of Naval Staff, Major General Ike Nwachuku, who was the General Officer commanding 1 Mechanized Division, Lieutenant Colonel Lawan Gwadabe, who was the military governor of Niger State. Federal ministers, members of state excos, traditional chiefs, and many others were also in attendance at the funeral of UK Bello. UK Bello commanded tremendous respect from all ranks, and the president had a lot of confidence in him. The first military coup in Nigeria took place in January 1966. A lot of leading military and civilian figures were killed in the coup. And before the Gideon Oka's coup, the January 1966 coup was considered to be the bloodiest coup in the history of Nigeria. But when the total number of persons that died on the date of the Gideon Oka's coup, military and civilian, is added to the total number of persons that were later convicted by the special military tribunals and executed by firing squad in the aftermath of the Gideon Oka's coup, Gideon Oka's coup was by far the bloodiest coup in the history of Nigeria. Many thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel for regular notifications.